Okay, I want to make sure we're all on the same page about how pressure and volume are related. We've seen this before, but now I want to talk more about changing the volume of a container. The container in the case of this unit is the thoracic cavity, which is going to contain the lungs. So as we change the volume of a container, how does the pressure change? Think about that, and I'm going to draw this picture to represent it. I'm going to keep the number of particles inside the same, but make my container smaller. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So as we increase, I'm sorry, here, we're decreasing the volume, we're increasing pressure. So increase. This is Boyle's law. So Boyle's law is the physical description, like from physics, of how pressure and volume are related to each other. In this unit, what we're going to be manipulating is volume. So as we increase volume, we're going to be decreasing pressure and vice versa. That's what we saw over here. As we decrease volume, we're going to be increasing pressure. And this again is the volume of the container. That's different than changing the volume of the substance inside of the container. So I just want to show that over here. If we change the stuff inside the container, so we've seen this with like blood volume. If we increase fluid volume, for example, blood, what do we do to pressure? We increase pressure. Those are not inversely, they're directly related. That would be the same for like the number of gas molecules. If we increase the number of gas molecules in a container, we'll increase pressure. More stuff in there bouncing around, taking up space. Again, so just keeping that separate from the container. We actually have seen this container example before too, when we saw the pressures of the heart, the ventricles contracting or relaxing during the cardiac cycle. That volume change dramatically influenced pressure during the cardiac cycle in the left ventricle is what we looked at most closely. So you've seen this before. We also also saw this with just vasoconstriction and vasodilation. So vasoconstriction, that's decreasing volume, right? That's increases pressure. So we saw it there as well. Okay, so this Boyle's law is really the driving force for inhalation and exhalation. The changes. So on the left here, volumes increasing because we have those muscles contracting. That is going to drive, that's going to mean that pressure outside the body is greater than inside, and that will allow flow of air into the lungs. Opposite on the other side here. During exhalation, volumes decreasing of the thoracic cavity and then lungs, and that means pressure inside is greater than outside, and we've got, flow out, airflow. One more thing about pressure, while we're talking about kind of basics of it, is we've seen this barometer before, right? This is a barometer. Now we actually want to look at this more carefully in terms of the numbers that are shown here, because we care about atmospheric pressure. We're actually going to base our lung volumes relative to atmospheric pressure, right? Because whether air moves in or out is relative to atmospheric pressure. So at sea level, PATM is pressure of the atmosphere is 760. What that's referring to is the air molecules that are pushing down on this barometer. At sea level, there's this amount of carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen add up to this much pressure. If you go higher in altitude, there's fewer air molecules. You can have higher or lower pressure. Lower. Okay, just for understanding that. Remember, pressure is force over area. So the number of air molecules matters. Okay, so respiratory pressures are always going to be relative to this. So we're going to kind of set this at 0 and talk about whether pressure inside the lungs is negative or positive compared to that. The other thing about on this slide is I want to introduce the concept of partial pressures. Partial pressure refers to the pressure exerted by each gas. And it's a kind of equivalent to concentration that's used for gases. So we will see PO2 and PCO2 the most often. P of N2, nitrogen, would also be a big one. It's actually a very high proportion of our atmosphere is nitrogen. This is talking about the partial pressure, the amount of pressure due to oxygen molecules. The partial pressure of each individual gas adds up to our total pressure atmospheric. We'll see this again, but I do want you to know now, like when I say PCO2, that's the amount of CO2. It's equivalent to the concentration when talking about gases. Okay, so last thing for this here is first do this learning check, and I'll answer them kind of indirectly when going through this. What I'm going through here is not the answer to that exactly, but a review of an application of these same numbers. So first we got pressure in the atmosphere, 760 millimeters of mercury. We're going to call that zero, right? And then the pressures inside the lung and other places in the body will be relative to that. So this pressure inside the lungs here, you can see it's zero. What that means is it's also 760 millimeters of mercury. It is not different than atmospheric pressure. This is intrapulmonary pressure inside the lungs, also called P-pul. Okay. So zero is really what that is. It's this here, no air is moving in and out, there's no volume changes. Zero. There's another number here though. This is intrapleural pressure. So in between the two pleura, this is PIP. This is -4, right? So that also we could say that 756 millimeters of mercury, 4 less than our atmospheric. Actually, that's not always true. It's 4 less than our intrapulmonary. So it's always relative to this. So this is always more negative compared to which one? Our P-pul. That keeps the lungs inflated, keeps them from collapsing. It's a negative pressure. If this was zero, our lungs would not stay inflated anymore.